All right, welcome everybody. This is the Building Grounds Committee meeting. We have two important topics. The second one, in my opinion, is probably more important, but we'll get started. And as always, we'll try to keep the meeting going. If we get into redundancy and repeating ourselves, I'll probably step in and try to keep things moving since we do want to keep online tonight. We have an exec session after this meeting and then our normal board meeting. So first discussion is going to be the East Pike roof. As many or all of you know, we have been discussing this multiple times over the past probably year and a half. We're going to attempt, there's motions on the board agenda tonight related to this discussion. We are going to talk about a new HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioning system on both the admin wing and the old office space. So we had hired CJL Engineering to develop a report, provide us options, which they did. We did discuss them already. We can go through and with the different options for the admin wing and the old office space, ask questions. Our engineer has made recommendations, and so we could go through. We'll start with the admin wing first. And on the summary report, that is area D on page, it starts on page 2 of the report. I'm going to try to, just keep this brief and stuff. There's basically three options: option 1A, option 1B, and 1C. The option 1A is new rooftop units with VAV boxes. And then with that, they looked at putting the mounting the units on the ground in the rear of the building. And then they looked at providing space or using space inside the building to provide the units. Is there any go ahead, Eric, if you want to go through the options and then.
I'm sure. Well, option 1A basically replaced the two rooftop units that you have on the roof. And it includes a conversion to the VAV system. Right now you have problems with your small diffusers, and it would convert it to a traditional VAV system. Option B basically just moves the units to grade, get them off the roof. And option 1C was we found that there was no room in this building to be able to put the air handlers inside.
Okay. Then go on to option 2 and then option 3 for the admin wing.
Option 2 is a PRF system. So they're basically heat pumps with an energy recovery unit. It's quite a bit more expensive than the first couple options. And then option 3 was geothermal, which is another heat pump option, which utilizes geothermal. And that was the most expensive. And we're based on cost and functionality and consideration. Option.
And what's your recommendation out of the 3 different option types for the admin wing?
Based on the cost and the maintenance concerns and functionality, option 1A.
And also the utility cost?
Yes, I believe that 1A is the cheapest.
Okay. So, Paul, if you have any questions? You're the only committee member here. I'll go to you first, and I'll go to Cinda and Julia.
Open it up the other way. Let me finish one.
All right. Cinda, any questions on the admin wing 3 options?
So I have not read your pro and con list recently. I read it the other day. What are the there's one pro, one con here. What what do most of the buildings that you do, which system do they use? Which one's more in use everywhere?
Option 1A.
Is it something that's used predominantly in school buildings, or what are school buildings, why are school buildings different than other commercial style buildings? Are there different codes for school buildings, or there different, I mean, I know it's a seasonal use
I mean,
building,
from a
but
code perspective, they're pretty similar to other commercial buildings. You know, schools do have certain special trades, but option 1A, VAV boxes and rooftop units, it's a system that you'll find in many school buildings, you'll find in many commercial office buildings. It's a pretty standard system.
and is that what we have at the high school?
No,
What do we have at the high
this
school?
is an office building, so it's not a classroom building, and there's a difference in the usage. So this is more like
Oh, we're
a
only
commercial
talking, we're
office
talking
building.
this,
No,
okay,
we're talking about this wing, to be clear.
okay, yes,
Okay, we don't
yes.
have, we don't
that
have,
makes
we
it
don't have
clear.
25 kids in a room running around. We have Jared sitting back there with his abacus.
And he
He does
uses
have
it
one, yes.
quite effectively
Yeah, it
and
makes a
causes
lot of
lots
heat.
of friction and
Lots
lots
of
of
heat.
Generate a lot of heat.
Gary,
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well,
No,
let's say
I-
we finish first and then.
I don't see, I mean, I haven't been everywhere in this wing, but it just seems very small, and I don't see how you would ever get any units inside the building without major construction of another, like an engineering room or something, so
I
the
agree with that.
rooftop
and
seems to be to me, that seems to be logical.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, that's why we explored option 1C and came to the same conclusion.
And in the report, I will say, there is a more detail with all the options for
Okay.
both the engine wing deal. And that was part of the reasoning why we recommended option 1A. Architectural challenges in this admin wing, very shallow ceiling to roof space. Anything else in it?
No, but the thing about the curbs, the
Well,
other thing that we're addressing, that all
That's
goes,
another discussion.
but
It goes, with-
that doesn't matter which rooftop unit we use, that's what we're gonna have to do.
We'll have to discuss it.
Okay, all right.
go ahead, Tom, you're.
I needed
I'm
to
ready.
be here for the discussion.
I just like being backed into a corner on this option. This is basically what we have now, 20 years more modern. It's not the system I would pick if we were building this building from the ground up. I'd also have another foot in the basement, and maybe no basement at all. But it will be the cheapest system by far, and it'll have the least impact on the interior of the building, being that there's virtually no duct work other than some ceiling work that you have. So I just like the answer. I have to accept it, but it's basically replacing what we have with more modern equipment, and it's not really solving any of the long-term problems. We should have some better controls. It's not a very energy efficient system, but it is what it is. And I'm not going to get anywhere by complaining anymore about it.
All right, thanks, Barb. I know you're late, but we're talking about option area D, which is this admin wing on page 2.
Oh, okay.
And Eric went through the 3 different types of options.
We got to move quickly in 8 minutes.
Well, we didn't cover the first one.
Ah!
We just started here.
Ah. I'll have to swing back around or,
All right. Tammy, any questions?
Yeah, option 1 definitely cheaper and least amount of work, but as Tom was saying, it's not a long-term solution for a lot of the problems.
Well, I disagree with that. Maybe Eric can.
I mean, it will fix the controllability problems that you have. It's part of the building. Which is, there's some controllability problems with these smart diffusers. They don't control temperature like they should. Replacing those with VAV boxes will solve that problem.
Eric, does this include the management system?
Yes.
The Johnson Controls is included in this number?
Yes.
And he,
Yeah, so it will be an expansion of that new Johnson system you have in the front there. We'll expand upon that system with the all new controls from this part.
and that's explained on page 9 of the control. Anything else?
No, I was liking option 2 just because it would accommodate the congested corridors, but it doesn't have dehumidification control. Yeah, so looks like option 1.
Walter,
I guess I need to use the microphone. Yeah, I realize I wasn't at some of the meetings that you guys maybe talked about this in depth. But I still think at some point in our heating HVAC systems in the school districts, we need to take a longer view in how energy efficient those are. Right now, we've got all kinds of movements at all levels of government pushing us, whether it's Reggie, whether it's the Green New Deal, whatever, to go to more energy efficient systems. And I really struggle with the idea that we're going to heat the air up or cool the air down and then turn around and reverse that to put it into which is, I think, as I understand it, kind of the current system that we have basically throughout our buildings. And at some point, I think we need to be looking at different systems and the paybacks that those systems will yield over the longer term. I mean, I'm not going to hold this up if this is really where this needs to go to keep this thing moving forward. But I just think that we need to start thinking more long term on this. Capital expenses, yes, I understand we want to hold those down, but if it holds down our operating costs in the future, then is that not something maybe we want to pay more attention to? So that's kind of where I'm at.
well, I think this option does that, Walter, on the options that were presented. It's estimated to be the cheapest operating cost.
Well,
And then Joel, you or Tamara, anything?
I have a question. With number 1, does that include all the controls? Like every,
yes. Yes, it does.
I can't think of the name of there's a technical name for the one set of controls.
What's the question about the control?
No, it wasn't that.
TDC.
No. If I think about it, I'll ask. But that was my only concern, to make sure everything was included.
Yeah, just a quick point of clarification. I am not as well versed as everyone else in this, but if I'm hearing you correctly, Eric, you're saying a couple things. Number one, the recommendation your firm is giving, which specializes in this, happens some weird stance to be the cheapest one. So unlike usually sometimes we run into the best option being the most expensive, this is one where, in your professional opinion, the world's aligned where the one you recommend is also the most cost affordable, and it complements some of the other systems we put in with the new addition to East Pike. Is that correct?
Well, the automated system that you have over there, we would expand upon that every year.
Okay.
My opinion is it's going to be the cheapest utility cost based on your heating natural gas heat.
Okay.
The other two options are electric heating systems. Now, while they may be high efficiency systems, electricity right now is more expensive than natural gas.
Okay.
Using that, and schools are primarily heating since we're long in the summer, so natural gas usually results in the highest utility cost.
But this
Thank you.
building has air conditioning in the summertime and is running all 12 months, this building that we're talking about. So generally, you're right in a classroom situation, but this building we have to air condition it so he doesn't mail his abacus.
Well, that is true.
Okay.
That is true, and I mean, if we really needed to get down to nuts and bolts on that, we would have to run an energy model. That wasn't in the services of this report, that requires another special handling. That's, in the past reports that I've done, that usually works out in the UK. So,
Even when they use AC, during 3 out of the
it depends on the building. I have had costs cheaper, but generally the natural gas outweighs the electric. I can't say that at 100% because I didn't do an energy model on this building, but based on, the averages that I've done in the past, that usually is.
When they do those energy things, do they take into consideration the fluctuation of the natural resources? Because I've been
As
told
best-
that natural gas is gonna go sky high.
As best
And
as they can. It is hard to predict the future on that kind of stuff, especially with changes in administration, with the United States, but as best as we can, we do. Natural gas in the last, 15 years has been traditionally a lot cheaper than electric. That changed? Yes, it could.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, go ahead, Barb.
What's the lifespan of this unit?
20 years.
15 to 20 years.
It could go to 15, it could
Change
go to
on
30. Who knows?
It's tough to predict the accident. It's warranted for 5,
I'm sorry.
warranted for 5, and you hope to get 15, and there's going to be repairs between 15.
Usual warranty will be 2 years on the entire machine and 5 years on compressors. But, they usually last. Could they break 15? Yeah.
Well, at 15, Cheney's up on the roof fixing it.
Yeah.
Cheney's excited.
The
Okay,
successor, I guess you'd say.
Terry, what's Cheney's opinion? I mean,
agree. Janie, what's your opinion?
My opinion is, this is what myself and our staff are accustomed to working with and working on and are the most comfortable with. Some of the other options are well outside our bounds of ability to work when we don't have those highly technical skills. This is what we would be most comfortable working with. And the controls, we're already used to that because we have it in part of this building now. So in all 6 of our buildings, we're running tools and controls. We're also comfortable with that and the control side.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is then, for the motion tonight, is move forward with option 1A for the area B admin wing.
Jared, can you make the decision then? Or you want me to bring it up at the regular? Thank you, sir.
Okay, now we'll go backwards here a little bit to page 1, which is area E, which is the old office space of East Pike. You recall from the previous meeting, Bucard Horn had developed a schematic working with the admin team here of what we're proposing to use that old space for. And then as part of that discussion, we'd also added 3 classrooms to the HVAC study that are adjacent to the old office. There's 2 on one side and 1 on one side, right, of the old office space on the back side of the building. So again, the CJL engineering, Eric, had put together a report, again, showing 3 options for that space. So Eric, if you would cover that.
Well, generally, the options are the same as we just discussed. Option 1 is rooftop unit with VAV boxes. Option 2 is the variable rate refrigerant flow system, and option 3 is the geothermal system. So from a functionality standpoint, they are pretty much the three similar options. We didn't break out into options 1B and 1C like we did in this part of the building, based on the rooftop unit that's there now is in the back of the building. It's kind of hidden by the gym roof. So we didn't really look at a grade mounted option based on that. And there really wasn't anywhere, locate central station indoor air handling equipment in that area of the building either. So if there's any questions, I'm happy, but yeah, they're pretty much the same three options. Just a different part of the building.
Yeah.
It is a classroom atmosphere, so that's a little different.
Yeah.
One of the pros to option 2 in the variable refrigerant flow system is that's a very quiet system. Other than that, option 1 does lend itself to being the least expensive. Again, it is also a quiet system, just not quite as quiet. It's going to be that common equipment that Cheney talked about. It'd be similar to this part of the building, so you'd have several equipment on both sides again.
Okay, and Mike, if you do us a favor and remind us all of what is being proposed for that old office space and the 3 classrooms.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Kerr. What we're doing, as you know, we made a move from switching the autistic classrooms and life skills classroom from Ben Franklin over to East Pike. We also see a number of kids, a number of autistic students enrolling in district rising every year. So what we'd like to do is take that old office and make it into 2 classrooms and then include an area for a copy room where it's air conditioned. Because what we find happening, I know it sounds trivial, but in some spaces that are not air conditioning, the paper starts to get some humidity and start to roll up and crumble up, and it results in paper jamming of the printers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really looking at the goal to try to get 2 classrooms out of this maneuver at a cost. I think Buchar Horn quote is about $135,000. We have some work to do with the Pennsylvania Department of Education to submit our proposals, what exactly we want to use the classrooms for, whether it's life skills, autistic support, or something regular ed. And we are seeking approval for that. We have to be cognizant and aware of how many special ed classrooms we have in one area because it has to be an ebb and flow. But at the end of the day, I think what the public needs to understand and know is that they're generally going to use 2 classrooms. We're going to gain 2 classrooms. And that's more important than ever as the conversation that's on item number 2. We are going to run out of space if you would decide to collapse a building. So right now, in order to make a change work, these 2 extra classrooms are needed regardless of the designation. They're both needed in order to make the change happen. We'd like to make them autistic classroom due to facilities nearby where we have a bathroom in the old nurses station. But we are going to gain 2 classrooms is the big takeaway out of this. And when you look at the cost of $135,000 that Buchar Horn quoted us, that's a significant, that's a nice feasible expense to get 2 classrooms out of this ordeal. But that's what we're looking at long-term, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Can I also expand on that?
Sure.
Mr. Kerr? We're also, part of this HVAC, we're looking to not only provide that within the old office itself, but expand it to some of the classrooms that are kind of right next to the office, because in a typical year, we always have some type of doctors and students or students in regular ed settings who need air conditioning. So we are putting those kind of not window units, but they're floor units that vent out through the windows. So we're putting those in multiple classrooms across pretty much every elementary building that we have. So we were looking at if we're going to put a new unit on there to expand it to some of those classrooms so that we can, in any given year, move a classroom that needs to have AC into those. I think it's 2 or 3 extra classrooms that we were going to expand the system over, so we have that available to us if we don't have to put the window units in.
And Mr. Kerr, when we talked to the Buchar Horn, it was at nominal cost. So it made sense. If we can get those other classrooms captured in this work, it made sense for us as we see the need and increasing every single year. So we thought it was a long-term step in the right direction.
and thank you for that overview. And it was a great idea to add these 3 additional existing classrooms into this report and study. So, Eric, I'll ask first, I guess, what option do you recommend?
Again, I recommend option 1. It's similar to the system that should be put over here. It has the ease of maintenance compared to the other 2, and it's the least cost.
Okay. And hopefully the least utility cost also. This time I'll go Cheney first. what option.
You know, again, because of the same reasons, I have to compare with that, that, you know, it's something that we're used to. We've seen it, we've worked on it many years, longer than I've been here, and that's what we're most comfortable with.
Thanks. And Barb, will go with you first.
What's the lifespan of option 2?
20 years. All three of the systems, I would say, are.
So the geothermal was also 20 years?
I mean, yeah, the central station equipment. You know, the well sometimes can last a lot longer than that. The central station. It's all right.
If you were to geothermal the whole school building, well, except for the administration wing, how much more cost would that add? I'm just kind of curious. I don't know enough about geothermal to know well size versus how much it cools.
That's a tough question. But what I can say is with geothermal, you know, in addition to the HVAC inside the school, the larger additional cost is actually drilling the wells. You know, we estimate between $12,000 and $15,000 per well that you would drill. I don't know. I mean, I can't say right now how many wells it would take to do this school. I can't say for the administration part, we calculated 14 wells. So if you took that times, you spread out the square footage, you get an estimate about how many, but it'd be quite a few. So.
Okay.
I would say would go with number 1. I was just kind of curious if you're thinking long-term of cooling the building, you know, if that geothermal would set us up for something later, but it doesn't sound like it would.
Right. Especially that area since it's 9-1 and the cooler month.
Well, we could always change that.
Well, we could flip it, yeah. Try that.
It'd be interesting.
Tom, since you're on the committee, you're next.
I dislike these bigger systems. I'm much more in favor of a smaller system in the corner of the room. We've seen that's stupid. But I'm continually overwhelmed by the discussion, so I don't know what to do. We've got a 1,000-foot room. We're putting in this tonnage that should be able to be locally controlled, but we're gonna go to a rooftop unit again. We're gonna go to big duct distributions. We're gonna go to VAV systems. It doesn't make any sense to me. It still doesn't make sense to me. So I dislike both decisions still.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Cinda.
So, a couple things. If the system is as big as Tom says, is there?
Well, let me interject here. If we choose to move forward with it, CJL or Bucard Horn will then really do an energy model.
Well, that's my next
size the equipment. What's in here is estimates.
Okay, estimates based on their professional experience. But you said at one point that, you know, couldn't answer that because we'd have to do a real heat study or whatever you call it. So based on the fact that the size of the area and your professional experience and what you can see in the construction of the rooms, that the classrooms are lots of windows compared to an office space that's fewer windows. I don't know if the ceiling heights are the same, but based on all of that, the rooftop units, do they make small rooftop units that will do small areas?
Yeah, when we get into the design, we'll absolutely do a load run calculation to determine the heating and cooling loss of the building or the portion of the building, and we will size the equipment appropriately to that. Okay, and we will not oversize it. We'll put the right tonnage in for the cooling, the right heating.
But how confident are you then, not knowing the exact heat loss calculations and the exact size that we need as far as tons and BTUs and all that? How confident are you that these numbers are realistic?
I've been doing this for 20 years and I can get pretty close on a square footage basis in the classroom.
Okay, all right. And if it ends up that what you're quoting us is exceptionally large and that price is okay, what are the possibilities of spreading that out and air conditioning more rooms or using it in a larger area of the building? Is it possible
Well, I
that,
mean, if you guys are looking to expand into other parts of the building, I will size a rooftop unit appropriate for the area that you want served.
okay.
If you
all right,
want additional area served, we could make the unit bigger. If you wanted less area served, I can make the unit smaller. So,
Okay.
right now, the equipment that we've looked at is sized for the 2 classrooms plus the additional 3. So that's what we looked at.
Okay, so you didn't size it with any expansion in mind, making a little
That
bit
is
bigger
correct.
than, okay.
Yeah, right now, that is correct.
Right.
There you go.
Not at this time.
Okay. Yeah.
I know absolutely nothing about these things, so I will defer to people who do.
Walter, we'll go to you next, and then we'll go to Tamara or Julia.
Yeah, I'm good at this point. I mean, really the decision was made, I think, once you decide what to do with the admin wing, and the rest of it, I think, kind of has to follow suit. So.
Okay, thank you. Tamara, Julia, anything?
I have nothing.
Okay, hearing nothing from Julia. Is there anybody else in the room here? Questions, comments?
I don't see Julie on the call.
Okay. All right, well, again, I'd like to put on the motion tonight that's on the agenda for option 1 in area B.
We could do that, Mr.
Okay, we ready to move on to the elementary configuration discussion?
Yeah, if that's okay with you, sir?
Sure.
Oh,
Oh,
discuss the
yes.
the term.
I'm sorry, before we jump to that, we had discussed this at previous meetings about all the existing curb boxes that are on the roof. And a curb box is basically a rectangular or square curb that's on the roof that either fan units or the whole units sit on up on the roof. And then they could also hold vents or air fans, that sort of thing. So since we're replacing the roof, the CJL looked at all these things that are on our roof on the East Pike building. And there's a standard that those things are to be 14 inches high. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Some of them are not 14 inches. But what we also have learned through experience, I guess, we replaced the roof on the senior high school and on Ben Franklin with similar type roofs. And we did not raise all those things on those roofs, and they average maybe in height 8 or 9 inches. Jared did send the board an email today that has the number of curbs or things that need raised and what their existing heights are and what their heights would be after we add more insulation to this roof. So Eric asked us to make a decision of whether we're going to raise any of those things at this time. And I'm just throwing this out, my I guess next point is if we're going to do that, we ought to do it when we replace the roof. You don't want to come back, I don't want to come back with a whole new roof system and then start cutting into it and damaging it and making the repairs to do this. So that's why I guess we got to make a decision for sure here tonight, because we've already approved, at the previous board meeting, we'd already approved the replacement of this roof. So we're working on getting that ready to, we got quotes or we'll get quotes or from the contract, right?
Yeah, you guys, the board actually approved the quotes. Those have been handed over to the contractor. We actually received this week the bonding information for the contractor. You know, we are in line to get the roof work done this summer. So the board also approved having CJL work as the engineers to put together the bids to have this work on the roof curbs done. Now, we can certainly modify what we want that work to look like. But that had previously been approved either at the last board meeting or the board meeting prior to that.
I don't remember that. Did we actually approve the engineering for the,
You approved CGL proposal to do the engineering bid work for this work.
So,
And I can go through them if you want. You want me to talk about each one, or?
yeah,
So we got basically 5 different categories here. We got gravity intake ventilators, and those are bringing air into the building. Most of the time, they're connected to unit ventilators, so they are sucking in the building. So what happens is when we get the new roof, for the new roof, the curb will be, if you left the existing one there, it'll be 9 inches. Okay, so you do run the risk on those ones particular because they're pulling in the building. The snow can kind of build up on the sides when we bring them in.
to be clear, we're talking about the curb.
That is correct.
So we're adding 4 inches or so, 3.5 inches to the curb. Then the intake is on top of that curb.
That is true.
And the intake is higher than the curb.
That is true.
Okay, I just want to make sure everyone
It's-
understands
yeah,
it.
You're probably looking at another 6 inches there. That is true. I was just comparing curb heights. The standard curb height that we recommend is 14 inches.
And I understand, I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. The problem is that this intake here is 12 inches above the curb, right?
I wouldn't say it's 12, it's probably more like 6 above.
6 inches above the curb.
Yeah.
So you lift up this whole mat here 6 inches and you have the same problem. Okay, if the snow lays on top of the curb, it's still going to be 6 inches until it gets in there.
so this is the curb, say, right?
Yep.
It's 12 inches off the roof for the GIVs.
Okay.
And then there's a pipe on top of that,
Right.
right?
Yep.
It's about 6 inches.
Yep.
That
About, yeah.
It's sucking air.
But when snow lays,
Right.
it's going to lay on the curb like it lays on the roof.
Just give it a
So
picture.
I just, yeah, I'm frustrated because we're talking about raising these things up nominally. We didn't do it on 4 other roofs. We're going to spend as much money on raising these up as we're doing on the HVAC for this.
And there's
Doesn't
no,
make sense.
there's no need to be frustrated. I think
No,
we're just,
I
we're
thought
just
we already
getting to
talked
be,
about this.
we're just getting to a decision. And if everybody's comfortable making a decision without having further discussion, we can do that. But
You have a couple of these that are pipes, the plumbing vents, and then you have the other one, I think is just basically a hole in the curb.
there's 44 plumbing vents, there's 3 rooftop units, there's 36 exhaust fans.
So I understand that on the rooftop units, why at some point that you may want to set them up a little bit higher when we add this extra insulation. What I don't understand is rather than raise these curb heights or these boxes, however you want to describe them, if there's already pipes that are sticking out, why don't we just extend the pipe 6 inches?
Well, in the case of the plumbing vents, that's correct, because it is a pipe. But in the case of the exhaust fans, gravity ventilators, and intake ventilators, they're not pipes, they're pieces of sheet metal that are this big. They're like hoods. So what you do is you take them off, you increase the curb size, and then you put them back on. That's how you raise them up. They can't really be extended. You need to extend.
So how big are these holes then for these other vents or?
They range in size. A lot of them are 18 by 18, some are 24 by 24. The big ones are like 64 by 24. There's a bunch of different sizes, but they get somewhat large.
So again, my question would be, if the opening is even 18 by 18, a square opening, why couldn't you fab some sheet metal and just add right on to what you've already got, rather than go to the expense of raising it?
Well, that's typically not the standard practice. The roof curb incorporates the flashing of the roof to it, and it kind of goes up over the curb and meets the metal flashing at the top. That's just the appropriate way to seal the roof, I guess. Could a sheet metal contractor come up with something? Probably, but that's not typically the way to seal it.
I understand it may not be, one of the things that I have to do every day is think outside the box in order to kind of control the costs and still maintain what we're trying to do. So I guess my question is there some other way that we could do this without spending whatever that figure was? I don't have it in front of me.
I believe it was 265. We budgeted 375. Is that correct, Jared? Or did I misspeak there? I'm sorry.
Well, the curbing we've been talking about is 265,000, but there is some other work outside of the curbing that needs to get done on the rooftop in order to get the roof done.
What I'd like to throw out here, I actually was a sheet metal worker. And so what I'm going to throw out is that we raise the 3 rooftop units, curbing. Does that make sense? And
No,
no,
those should be, if we're gonna raise them, they need to be raised as part of the new rooftop units.
correct.
Okay.
That's
which-
why-
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, well, and that would be part of the HVAC package, not the roofing package. But the roofer will end up doing the work,
Right.
but the sequence would be, you pull the old one off, you put the new curb down, you put the new machine on top of it, you call it roof back.
That's not the way I'd want to do it, but I don't want to re-injure these roofs.
I understand that, but if you pull the old roof top off, you don't want to put it back on.
If
If you pull the old rooftop unit off the roof to put the new
Right.
curb under, you don't want to put
Right.
the old one back
I
on.
agree with that. Too.
And if we have the new machine, that's great.
Right.
Okay, that's a miracle if it happens.
That would be
So that to me sounds like as much of a coordination issue
right.
with folks that are doing the roof on this section of the building and those that are going to supply the HVAC units.
Correct.
Is that Eric? Is that?
What we're running into here is there's a timing issue. They're two different projects, and we don't know if we can get the new units in time while the new roof is being put on.
But
But
this
I
roof,
kind of agree with Tom in that if you take the old unit off and you build the curb height up, why would you put the old unit back on? Wouldn't it be better to put the new unit on after you've done that?
Well,
Yes,
I think what we discussed was this admin wing is a separate roof because of a parapet between this roof and the other roof. We talked about delaying the roof replacement of this until we do have the new HVAC unit. So that would be then coordinated. Because we bid it that way, or we got the estimate, I should say, that we can do the entire, both roofs or just the main roof and then do this one later.
Absolutely, we have that option, and the contractor knows we're still looking at that, and that we could at some point call and say, pull it off on the admin wing, we're not doing it this summer. Because I think everybody, and even CGL agrees, it's not worth building up that roof curve if you're not gonna put the new unit on at the
Right.
exact same time, so.
So the next question that I would have would be more towards Cheney. And that is, under the ESCO, 2016, 2015, we put a number of roofs on. I don't remember raising the curbs of these units any higher for those.
We did not
Okay,
raise any curbs.
so the question is, and I understand the point you're trying to make, Eric, where you're saying this is what the standard is and we're not doing it at the standard. question then for me is, have we experienced any problems in the last 8 years? Okay, with the ones that we already did without that? And basically, what's the height of those units compared to the issues that Eric is raising on the 5 different items?
The heights on our other roofs that we had replaced are very similar to these heights, and we have not experienced any significant issues since the roof replacements.
And I'll just clarify, the new heights are after we add the insulation to this roof. Because he gives us 2 different dimensions in what he sent us. And I'm okay with that, Walter. I think we discussed this, and Tom was right. We did discuss this before. And I thought we did land on, we were gonna, not raise them all, and just look at raising
The RTUs?
yes. Does that make sense, Eric?
That's fair. I'm here to do what you guys want to do. I wanted to bring the issue up and talk about it, and if that's what you guys want to do.
Janie sounds
that's what we'll do.
okay with it. Barb, Tom? Good?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, Cinda, Tammy, Walter,
So I get
Hammer.
if you don't raise the curbs, the risk is when we get too much snow.
Snow can enter the building. Right, that's-
So we just have to make sure when it snows, somebody shovels it.
I have done that in the past, not here, but when I was on staff at St. Andrews Village, back when we had to shut down, yeah, we shoveled for 2 days on the roof. But that was more for.
But that was a
snow.
blizzard of 3 feet.
But there were some of these issues occurring.
We all good? All right, I see you heading on.
Yeah, just so you know, we've got La Nina is forming and we're gonna get a bad winter this year, so.
All right.
So optimistic.
All right.
We're looking at next
I
winter
will
though.
again try to turn this over to Mike to go through the elementary reconfiguration discussion. I believe he has a presentation to show.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Have a nice night.
Yep, thanks for everything.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kerr. Just to give some context how we got to this point. The board started a conversation by looking at 10 different options, whittled it down to top 4 options, and then asked the administration to dig a little deeper in top 2. This month, we'll present one of the first ones you want us to vet, and then next month, we'll present the other. This month's presentation is focused on 3 pre-K through grade 5 buildings, and I think hopefully it meets your desire and wish to have a little bit more projected cost associated with it. We'll go through the presentation. We have the principals here to add any additional input or conversation that you feel is necessary. We also have Burkhart Horn on the line to address and discuss their findings and their cost projections as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come forward and put something together for the board and the committee to look at. As you know, the work, again, you asked us to follow up on SSI's work. Yes, sir.
Mike, just one point of order here. For Jim and Sue, our committee meetings are kind of open to questions, comments. So after Mike gets his presentation over, feel free to jump into the discussion or add your thoughts or concerns, okay?
So again, the work was to come up with the scenario, what it would look like to do 3 K to grade 5 buildings. And as formed by the Buildings and Grounds Transportation Committee meeting, what we did was we made the assumption under this scenario, Horace Mann would be the building closed. Ultimately, that's your decision. You could decide how you want to proceed, but that's how we did in order to plan for this equation. And part of the work was the administration had to redraw school boundaries in order to get this done. In this scenario, if you look at it simplistically enough, it looks like most of the students, if not all the students living in the borough, would attend the renovated Eisenhower building under the plan that we developed here this evening for your review. The first thing I'd like to go into, and I gave you each a PowerPoint printed in color for your convenience to look at and to go along. And again, any questions you have, please ask, and we'll do our best to address them. I think the first logical thing was, well, how big would the buildings be? I know one conversation that keeps coming up is the community schools, the need for small schools, and your passion for that. So what we wanted to do is really look at it and say, when we looked at this scenario, Ben Franklin would need 22 classrooms, and you're looking at about 439 students in the building. So close, same ballpark to where they're at currently. And the numbers, the bullet points there just give you average class size for that building. So for example, in pre-K, you have 20 kids, in kindergarten, 61, first grade, 75, and it goes through it for the other buildings as well. We then went to East Pike. We would need 22 classrooms, and we're looking at about 430 students enrolled in that building. Again, very similar when you look at size between Ben Franklin and East Pike. And then we intentionally made Ike the smallest for a couple different reasons. We have the least amount of land to work there with the most amount of work that needs done. And we also recognize it's in a smaller, more of a landlocked area where it's a little bit more difficult to get to. So we want to try to really, maximize the space in classrooms we have in the district. So you'll see there at Ike, we'll need 18 classrooms, and we're projecting 369 students in that building. And again, the numbers go through, and they're self-explanatory. The one thing we will talk about later in the presentation, Mr. Kerr, you'll notice an asterisk next to pre-K in the Ike classroom, because we currently have 2 pre-K classrooms. The board could have a discussion on a third pre-K classroom, as well as we need to talk about what's happening at the federal level and what that funding could look like. And that's going to be hard, sir, because I'm not there, and either are they. So I don't know the certainty which we're going to operate in, but I think it's prudent for the conversation this evening, at least to bring it up to committee's attention as we talk about what to do with the spaces. Because quite frankly, if you don't do a pre-K classroom at Ike, that's an extra classroom you have available. Now, I would recommend the more kids we can get in age 3 and 4 into our buildings, the better off we are. But that's something we'll have to decide down the road. So that's why there's an asterisk, if that makes sense, Mr. Kerr. If we move on to the next slide, what we did then was we gave you the class size in totality, meaning how many kids in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, etc. But we also wanted to let you know what the average class size would look like based on the staff that we have or the staff that we would need. And when you look at it, they look like very manageable class sizes. They fall really in a nice spot. You have a couple bubbles here at East Pike in 5th grade, but overall, they're really nice, manageable class sizes based on the work that we did. And we did that intentionally, and that's why you see Ike having the smaller rooms, or smaller enrollment, to give us enough space to really spread this out throughout the 3 existing buildings. But we think they're pretty nice classroom sizes. Again, we got a bubble in that 5th grade class, but being at East Pike, having the largest classrooms in the district, they can absorb that 1 year. Moving on to staffing needs. What we wanted to do is you gave us the challenge of saying, Mike, what do you want to do differently? And there's a couple of different things we have to point out. We're identifying 2 additional music teachers because what you see happening at the K-3 level is just general music. If we would go to K-5, the board have to ask themselves, do you want to include course and do you want to include lessons like we do at the 4th and 5th grade level? So we plan on sustaining the program and strengthening the program. So that's where the need for additional music teachers would come from. And then we also said, well, if we're going to do that, then let's have a conversation about STEM. You asked us to make some changes at the 4-5 with Mr. Sheeran. He's doing a nice job infusing STEM. The middle school already speaks for itself. It's the program of the year in Pennsylvania, and the high school has some great programming going on. My question to this group would be, would you want to expand that in the area of K-3, those kids that have that STEM opportunity as well? I think it makes sense. I think it's the right step to do. I think it's a step in the right direction. However, that would also come at a cost. And, if you say, well, Mike, why the additional teachers? There's really 2 big reasons. One, operationally, we need the staff to cover preps. But 2, this is a chance, if you want to make the most of it, to strengthen the programming in the district. So we estimate it costs about $520,000 annually for those 2 those positions. Now, the only thing with that, Mr. Kerr, is it does not include any cost for remodeling or equipment costs to STEM. I mean, those are manageable costs, and we can figure all those details out. So it shouldn't sway your decision. I just don't want to tell you that we did plan for that because it's still a little uncertain. You haven't made a decision as a committee yet or a board. So it's just something worth throwing out. And I apologize in advance for throwing out there. But again, the task issued by Mr. President was, look, if you had a chance to strengthen the elementary program, what would you do? And we think this is a step in the right direction. And I know STEM could be a buzzword and catchy kind of cool thing, but more important than the tools and the how, to me, what's more important is the why. When you look at this field, you look at this programming, there's a couple things that stand out to me. Number one, kids learn from failure. right? When you have to engineer something, you have to go back, and if it fails, re-engineer. So there's power in failure, there's power in growth, and there's power in creating that type of mindset where you can go back, reanalyze, reinvent, and then come forward with a new solution. Because that's what the world needs. The world's not a multiple choice test. The world's about how can you work with others in a group? Can you problem solve? Can you create solutions to problems that we have yet to encounter? And STEM programming is a step in that right direction. It also engages kids too. So do the other classes, but this is an opportunity we took to strengthen the program. And again, we'll defer to the board's wisdom, but we thought this was something that was opportunistic on our end to bring up. Additionally, we're going to ask the committee to think about Ideal Plus and grade configuration. Under this model, we are short one teacher. The board could make a decision about what do you want to do with synchronous instruction at the K-5 level. As you know, right now we have 3 people dedicated to synchronous instruction. You have the right to come back and say, Mike, only make it 2. That can fill one of the needs, or we can just hire a new staff member. The issue with Ideal Plus is it's working. If you ask me anywhere where synchronous teaching is needed, it's at the elementary level. And that's not to say that our middle school and high school kids don't need live instruction, but I think it's more so important at the elementary level. And we've seen a nice continuity of education during the quarantines that we've faced this year. To put things in perspective, Mr. Kerr, last year we encountered about 1,100, I was going to say 100,000, geez, 1,100 quarantines. And this year we're over 500-600, approaching 700. And it's only going to increase, I'm fearful of. So these synchronous teachers this year are needed now more than ever. They have done an incredible job meeting the moment. But long term, we really created something that people like. And you have to recognize that and understand that it comes with a cost. And educationally, I do think it's best for kids when they're learning how to read or do math through a live person, whether it's remote or in person. I think that live person matters. And we've been blessed with good staff and put right people in the right spots. They are absolutely killing it, for the most unprofessional term I can give you, but they are doing a great job in those roles. And that's something you're going to think about sustaining, because there's a cost associated with that. So if we had to hire 2 more classroom teachers or 1, it ups the cost that are projected there. Now, don't hold me to those costs. Those are some worst case scenarios. They can lessen depending on what decisions you make. But right now, I would personally say I would think long and hard about the synchronous, because that's shown to be pretty pivotal and pretty important during these times. Now, I will say this also, sir, and I know I said it last time, and I'm being redundant intentionally. We talk a lot about their learning loss, and rightfully so, but we also need to talk about the behavioral loss, the loss of structure, the social emotional, the trauma needs that our kids are facing, because that has a trickle effect on everyone. We have great kids, and they need additional supports, and we're really working hard to try to find out what those supports in this local area can be and should be. But there's going to be more support needed. I want to urge this committee, if and when COVID ends, we just don't go back to normal 1 year. There's going to be an aftermath of this, and we're going to have to pick up the pieces for years to come. And you took a big step in the right direction with the summer programming. You've seen 500 kids come take advantage of it, but there will be more work to be done. And that's not to be scary, mean, or intimidating. It's just to be honest and practical about how all these things to go together. Because Department of Health has a unique feature of just looking at the view of safety, right? And the PD has the unique ability to just look at the academics. We don't have that. We have to look at both academics and safety when we make our decisions. And sometimes those things, they mutually have to exist, and we have to figure out the best. And sometimes they're competing interests. So I just want to throw that out there, and that's what we're trying to plan long term, so you understand the thought process behind what we're doing. It could be flawed, and you have every right to poke holes at it. And our team's here to present our answers and findings, but we want to at least come up front because, again, you asked us to create something new, and that's what we did. The next one under staffing needs, right now, we use a traditional model pre-K counts classroom where, based on eligibility, income eligibility, kids are able to come into the program. One thing the district could do is say, okay, if we have 3 elementary buildings, do we want to open up a 3rd pre-K classroom, and then work with the Department of Education about offsetting those costs, meaning those who are still eligible come in, but maybe the district has to have now a part of the pie and put some money towards funding the classrooms, because I think there are more kids who would take advantage of the programming if it was made available. To further complicate it, I don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. Dr. Reagan and I were at a meeting, and I don't mean to throw her to the fire in her first meeting, but we were at a meeting at the IU, and there's some conversations about that happening and what that would look like. It's still not clear, and I don't want to misspeak, but there could be an opportunity to have funding for additional pre-K classrooms. The question I have is what happens after the money runs out? And the question I also have is what happens for the schools that don't have space? Is this money allowable to be used to increase space, to refurbish areas? Right now, a certain percentage of their pre-K counts grant can go towards some building facility upgrades, but I can't give you certainty right now. And I only say that because the feds, and I'm not poking a hole at our leaders at the federal level, but they have not made a decision yet. So we're kind of stuck and what that looks like and what that could look like for us. Again, but we think it's important to at least tell you have that option either locally. And that's also my understanding that when we talk about the federal money, it's our choice if we want to accept it. And we can also limit it. So we could take enough just maybe for one classroom after pre-K. Or you could say one question I constantly get, which I can't answer, is what do we do if we close the building? Maybe that's a resource. I don't know. But I'd urge some caution because the details have not been spelled out. I don't know how long the money would last and what happens when the money does drain out. And it might, and it could, and it probably will. So that's something that, if you say, well, what does that mean to us? And, best case scenario, if you want to, and I mean best case for kids, if you want to, on average, we have about 10 kindergarten teachers, maybe 8, and then maybe I'm off, all right? But if you're looking at about $120,000 person, we're quickly now looking at $1 million increase in our budget if and when the money would dry up. And I'm not sure it will. I'm not sure the particulars, but this is both an opportunity and a risk at some levels. But anytime we can get our kids in front of our teachers, and please, Head Start and all those places do great jobs too. I'm not demoralizing or defaming them, but our teachers do an amazing job too. The sooner we can get them in the program, the sooner we get them supports. I think that's how we start closing the gap. And there's 3 gaps I'm talking about: learning gap, opportunity gap, but also the gap between research and theory, right? And we're trying to combine all those gaps right now, and it's going to be overwhelming to the system for a lot of people, but it's something we're paying attention to, and it's something we think you have to be aware of. The money figure that you see presented on the screen is only one teacher and one paraprofessional, because I can't tell you with certainty what's going to happen from the federal level. I don't know, sir. They haven't passed that bill. But you could say to me, Mike, regardless of the bill, I want a pre-K classroom at Ike. And you could do that. And there would have to be some cost associated with that, where Rob, Jared, Justin, myself would have to work with PD and finagle that, which it could be done, right? But we would have to look at that and see how we would proceed. But I at least want to bring it to your attention, sir. Moving on. You look at the screen here, it just gives you a potential in staffing expenditures due to the change. Again, this number is fluid depending on what we do and what decisions we make. That number can change. And I look at it as an investment too. It's an opportunity, but it's something that I have to at least bring to your attention. Then we did a little bit of a breakdown looking at the new additional staffing costs and then looking at some of the possible elimination of positions, some savings we could have. The only thing I would say with this is urge some caution here on a lot of different levels. For example, I included a cost for an LPN to be removed from the budget if a building was to close. Right now, I can't find personal care aid. Let me restate that. Justin can't find enough personal care aides for somebody's family. So yeah, we may not need the LPN position, but I can repurpose this person to help do some other needs in the district because we're not finding third-party vendors able to fulfill their contracts. And I'm not being detrimental or nasty to them, but we are not above the talent wars and that we are now facing here in not only Indiana, in the country. So with some retirement, these people could save their jobs. If you also look at the 2 custodians, yes, I count as a savings, but if you ask me, we probably need all of them. Our buildings are Cheney. I have to applaud him. Does an amazing job leading his group and what they do to keep our buildings clean. And in fact, I don't want to, gloat too much for Cheney, but we had PCCD, Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, came to the junior high for a training that we held for the region, with 70 different people involved in it. And someone from Penn Hills, I apologize, I don't remember her name, but she went to the secretary, and Cheney, you can help me, and Kevin and Aaron, because I may screw this up, but basically went to the secretary at the middle school and said, oh my God, who cleans your buildings? And the secretary just took it as a compliment. And she's, no, seriously, who cleans your buildings? I want them to meet with my staff to teach them how to do it. So my point is, we are maxing the system.
True story.
Yeah, we are maxing the system to its brink right now with all the COVID protocols and all the challenges we're facing. This could be a saving, but these people also could be needed elsewhere too. And I just want to put that out there, not meaning they will, but it's something to think about. Yes, Ms. Parker.
Unless the plan is to completely close Horseman and give the deed to somebody else, would you not still need a custodian to shovel the snow and mow the grass?
Yeah, I mean, it's something Cheney can work on. I don't know if you need a full-time person, maybe something Cheney would need, maybe one person that would have to be a rover. I don't know. That's something we'd have to work with Cheney. I didn't bet that entirely because that's a little outside my box, but I think it's a good point. It's something to be cognizant and aware of.
If you kept the admin assistant. Wouldn't that allow the principals and superintendent to go home a little earlier?
No, I know. I mean, like,
Just saying.
well, and you bring up a good point, not about that, but you bring up a good point about, like, for example, you're acting on tonight on the resignation of secretary for Ike. If the building was closed, that person could easily move in that position. So when you look at this, we have to look at retirements. We have to look where we're at, because if we can keep our people, we want to keep our people. We're gonna have to take a wait and see approach. But again, there are some savings. It is somewhat misleading, though, because there are some other needed or other places we could put these people. And the one thing that scares me right now, and I don't want to speak for Justin, I'll defer to his wisdom, is the lack of these third-party vendors to be able to fulfill some of these contracts. I've told you before, I would reach out to IUP and other local institutions. IUP is looking at sending us, I think, 6 nursing students, and we're going to work with the Mount to probably get another 10. The issue with that is it's good in some ways, right? It's going to help with some of the workload, but the bad is they can only be supervised by RNs. So it's going to help in some areas, just not as much as we thought. So we're getting some help, but it just may not be enough to fill the system. And we're all working hard. Please, I want you to know that. And we're trying to be as clever as we can, but the third-party vendors' ability to fill these positions is a continuous concern for me as we move forward. So again, I just want to throw out there. Does that make sense? Okay.
Mike,
Yes, ma'am.
just on the lighter side, have you considered the income potential that we have if you start renting Cheney out as a consultant?
I know. It was just nice to hear that, because they like,
Yeah.
honestly, Miss Cinda, I don't know what to tell you. Everyone's working incredibly hard, and all I can give them is attaboys. And I know it's not enough,
Yeah.
but they are working their tails off. Everyone is. Cheney treats his people well, but boy, it's returned in twofolds, because they're killing it. Everyone is. So you need to know that. Under building needs and layouts, what we wanted to do is now say, okay, we told you what we needed. Let's talk about what we have and how those things line up. If you were to make this move at Ben Franklin, 21 out of 22 classrooms would be used. If we had an increase in growth or population, we could take, which you'll see on some corresponding slides, we have rooms called title rooms, and we can make that a classroom if needed. So we have a little bit of wiggle room, but we're pretty close to max, and we just want to make the board aware of that. We'd also need to upgrade, make some upgrades, and you have to decide what that looks like. And you're going to get to the point where whether or not doing any upgrades to Ben Franklin makes sense or not. And you're going to have to figure out what that looks like down the road. But we would have to, make some changes, because when we look at what you've done, and I give you credit, Horseman, new entryway, East Pike, new entryway. Ike is going to get a new entryway. We may want to look at, I don't want to say fortifying, that's a terrible term, securing Ben Franklin in some regards and making some upgrades and investments in there. But, we're going to have to look at the cost and see what your priorities are, because I don't think you're going to get everything out of this, right? You're going to decide what you want to do, how you want to spend it. But this gives you an idea about how the buildings would be used. In East Pike's case, 21 out of 22 classrooms would be used. That's only if we make the changes that we spoke about and got support previously. And again, the price of $135,000, I'm not an architect, Mr. Kerr, but I thought that was a great steal. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's correct. I don't know if that's what the market says. But Elijah and Mr. Selly, Thomas gave us their quotes. So you saw, just like I did, that's a great bargain to get 2 classrooms out of this deal and get that building up to speed. At Ike, we'll need 18 classrooms. We're looking to be short anywhere between 6 and 7 classrooms. And I didn't include the estimated cost because I have that on other screens. We're going to look at parking, right? Parking is going to be one issue, and travel could be one issue for the community. I don't know if they would want more people come in there or not. That's something we have to discuss. But it's, it comes at, if you want a community school, well, there's something that goes along with that. And that may be a little bit inconvenient. And I don't say that to be dismissive of people's view. It's just a reality where we're in. We also have to do a multi-purpose area and a specials wing that's included in Beauregard Horn's calculation, and we'll get to that as well. Moving on. So what would the buildings look like? We would not need additional staffing for ESL, but all schools would provide ESL services. We had some conversations that we all wanted one building or not. And then we looked at transportation. We looked at the community schools model. We looked at where people wanted to be. We thought just keep it in each school. It makes sense. We can staff it with the staff that we have, and it would be in their community school. Again, at Ben Franklin, some upgrades would be needed universally as described. East Pike, all 3 schools, again, would provide ESL services. Here's where we'd help, like we do now, house a life skill and autistic classroom, I would urge some caution because I bet you would see another autistic classroom in the very near future. And we look at some of the trends locally, historically, throughout the Commonwealth, the number is continuing to rise. And I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's something we need to be cognizant of because we'll need space. East Pike's rooms are absolutely ideal space-wise for this challenge and for this need. Where Ben Franklin made it work, but the teachers and the aides are doing a nice job, and Mr. Springer and Mr. Zohorchik are doing a really good job handling that. Because when you look at it, and please, I'm not being critical because they deserve all the support they can get, those students, just like any student does. But sometimes you have more adults in the classroom than you do kids. And we need space for that, right? That takes up space. And Ike or East Pike has been really nice in addressing those needs. At Ike, again, at ESL, I think now the trend's called ELL, English Language Learners, but they'll still be provided services there. That's something important to keep be aware of. Again, through all three buildings, the number is going to grow as we continue our partnership with IEP and people continue to move into this area. Those are services we have to provide. And please understand this: it's really every year they do home language survey, and every year if they just mark that they speak another language, they're automatically now have to be tested out of the program, so they're required to get services. So those numbers could change and could grow. And if IUP continues the great work they're doing, then I think it could grow. So we want to be cognizant of that as well. We would keep life skills and autistic classrooms in that building as well, because we didn't think it made sense to move everyone over here because we needed those other class spaces for kids. When you look at the redesign, how we did the building, so we planned for those kids to be at Ike as well, sir. The next couple screens, I'll defer to the principals, Mr. Kerr, if you would have any conversation. But what we asked them to do is we asked them, say, look, how would you place everyone? Where would you place everyone if we were to go this model? Meaning, what classrooms would be kindergarten? What classrooms would be, first grade, second grade, etc. If it's okay with you, Mr. Kerr, why don't I give the principals, in this case, we'll start with Kelly, a chance to explain the rationale behind what they did and see if there's any questions and anything clarifying. Is that okay with you, Mr. Kerr?
Sure.
All right. Kelly, I'll defer to you for the first one.
Sure. Just trying to figure out the breakdown. As much as I love having my teachers together and they're collaborating right now, I have basically each in a wing or in the main hallway. With the breakdown of numbers, I wasn't able to make that happen. And so I created more of a vertical alignment, meaning I'll have K through 5 in each wing. That was about the only way I could figure out how to make it work. Now, this isn't set in stone. I could make different changes. If we were to do a band and chorus, I would have that close to the general music room. And again, kind of on the end of one of the wings, because that's going to create more sound, I would imagine. I've not been in a school that has these yet, but I did talk with Aaron and Krista, so we would need to have it kind of removed from the regular ed classrooms just so that learning can continue. The concern is always going to be the classrooms that are up the steps and not being accessible. And so that was the other reason why I had to kind of spread the grade bands out across the school, because I can't put all of 4th and 5th grade up the steps, for instance, in case we had somebody that was in a wheelchair or had mobility issues or even break a leg throughout the year. So that's why I made the decision to spread it out the way that I did. I don't know if you want me to talk about any concerns that I would still have with the building, but cafeteria would be one of them. The layout of the cafeteria.
In the estimate for Ben Franklin, they have an elevator budgeted.
Yeah, right.
No, they do. If an elevator,
Oh my goodness.
if an elevator is budgeted, does that change your layout?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is if you don't have an elevator.
Correct.
Okay.
I didn't know that there was an elevator.
Well, no, it's just budgeted.
Okay.
Okay. Tom's trying to get you an elevator.
Thanks, Tom.
No, the other Tom.
Oh, okay.
Tom Selling.
Thanks, Tom.
Sound like, ooh, you know people.
It's right there. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that you're clear.
Okay. Is there anything else I can clarify or any other questions?
And again, we can keep going. If you have any questions, we can always come back to it, but for the sake of time. If we move on next, Mr. Springer is joining us remotely. He is not feeling well. I told him to take the night off, but he wanted to be here anyways. God love him. But he did the same thing. So you can look at the building layout right now up here and see what it's looking like as well. And again, you'll see the increase of some spaces being used and how that building would be reconfigured. So Dawn, anything you want to talk about the rhyme or reason in which how you identified the rooms and their usage, sir?
Sure. So pretty much starting at the right-hand side, start in pre-K and then move through East Pike. When you finish at 5th grade on the other end, you are heading to the junior high. So it's basically one long hallway. Based upon the
Master logic. There's some logic.
So the student's goal is to get to the other end of the hallway.
That's right.
I mean, it would be stupid to do it the other way, right? Because you just walk into a bank. The other way, you're at least heading toward the junior high. East Pike has had instrumental music and the choral program in the past that would occupy the same spaces that it did previously. So we have a nice large music room that does have enough space available for chorus. The stage area is what is listed as in band. That's our current stage. It's not a new space. It's just a space that hasn't been used since we removed it for when we switched over to the 2K3 and 245 buildings. Some of the smaller spaces that I have there, AS is autistic support, LSS is life skills. And then LS is learning support, Title I, obviously. T1 is Title I. But that's pretty much the building in a nutshell, using the same configuration. I've been in Indiana for a while, so I remember the days we were a K-5 building previously. So not a whole lot of changes on our end. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Miss Cinda.
In the old office area, you've got the coffee room and then a 3rd grade room and then an administrative room and then I think it's the autistic support room. What's that administrative room going to be? I thought that was going to be all classrooms.
So yes, the AS room is a current. That would be like where I believe that is where the current nurse's office is, and then this was done previous to there will be an extra room in there, and then the 3rd grade. So there'll be two. That extra room would no longer be extra. That is an error on my part. So because the renovation was 2 full-size classrooms there, and then the copy area. So that drawing has I have not updated the drawing since the architects shifted. We've had a lot of discussion about what that space would be, and this drawing was done off of one of those discussions.
Okay.
So yeah, that EX we just would eliminate the EX.
All right.
I'm sorry, when you eliminate the EX, what does it become?
It's just 2 classrooms instead of 3 there, Tom.
2 classrooms. So this.
So EX becomes extra classrooms?
If you would just take the 3 and stretch it a little bit to the right, and autistic support stretch a little bit to the left. That I had that broken up as 3 classrooms. The architects drew it as 2.
I like it. I like your sketch better.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not an architect, and anybody sees me with a ruler and a calculator, they should just run the other way.
Okay, I recommend making the copy room smaller and getting 3 classrooms in there if we can. Move on.
Next one on the list is for Erin to go over. We wanted to take some great time on Ike and give her the platform to give her a voice, because this is the building that will need the most amount of work. Comes as no surprise with the fire. But you noticed a couple things before I turn to Erin. We did eliminate the modulars, the area. So we did not plan for that as part of the classroom space that we need. And also what's not showing on here is, remember, we agreed as a group to remove the curved window and put the entryway area and spaces that way. So working on with those 2 variables, Erin then went through and said, okay, here's how I can use the existing space, and then came up with her additional needs. So Erin, why don't we give you the floor? Go ahead, explain your work and how you came up with the additional classrooms as well.
Sure. as you know, Eisenhower is basically 2 hallways. And currently we had like what was called the specials wing. If we moved the special wing, I thought we put our youngest learners down that hallway because that would allow them to be together and to have a little bit of a community. And that would put them close to the cafeteria and some of the other things that they would need to use. And when it's with little guys and little feet, it sometimes is easier to have closer proximity. So I kind of put pre-K, first grade and kindergarten in that hallway. And then on our main academic hallway, which we are currently using for our classroom areas, I have our second, third, fourth grade. We would need an additional classroom in that area for the fifth grade because I would need 3 fifth grade classrooms. So we would need another fifth grade classroom. Then in addition, it has 2 classrooms for growth. That could include the autistic support classroom if we decide to put that over there. And then we have the life skills room still where it's currently, allowing it to be in the ebb and flow of the environment for the students. We'd also need two and a half classrooms for reading specialists, school psych, those kinds. Those don't have to be full classrooms. Those could be just the half classrooms, but those would be needed as well. Of course, we would need a wing then to put on all our specials in because I've taken the space for the specials and incorporated that into classroom space. In addition, we would need a multi-purpose room for physical education class because that would have to be going on all day long. We could not share that with the cafeteria any longer in order to be able to get our specials in a timely manner and get all of our students serviced throughout the day. And also I put there that along with the autistic support, we would need a cool down room of some sort. Again, that does not have to be a full size room. A half size room would work as well for that, but I definitely would need at least 1 cool down room. 2 would be preferable. If we're going to go pie in the sky and what would be the ideal school, that the 2 rooms would be necessary then for cool down because we have students that have emotional support issues that use it as well as the autistic support kids that would use it. So basically that's the outline of what I did with the current space and with the needs that would be for a K to 5.
In addition to the cool down rooms, if you don't want to change the vernacular, it'd also be PBIS positive support
Sure.
rooms, which a lot of school districts do. You could talk to Dr. Runge and the school psych department. So there's multiple needs there as well. But I thought Aaron did a nice job really working this up with us. We met as a group and we all then divide and conquer. But any questions, Mr. Clerk, can move on. So this is when I'll start deferring to Bureaucrat Warren because I cannot do any justice in this area. But when you look at the work needed for Ike in East Pike, it's nearly $7 million. And I got to be honest with you, that's not a bad number if that's true. If that gets the building up to where it should be, and get almost practically a brand new pristine building for Ike, and then get East Pike and the renovations they need, I think that's a great price. But again, I have nothing to base it on at all.
Like the 7.7 includes some improvements to Ben Franklin.
Well, yep. And then if you go to the next slide, there's $1 million for Ben Franklin upgrades that the architects provided for us, and then which ends up being $7.7 million. Now, what I did, Mr. Harley, I added, we look at the staffing cost plus the extra cost that came to 8.4. But what I did, Mr. Kerr, for everyone's convenience, I know it's hard to read. That's why I printed these out. I took a screenshot of Bureaucrat Horn's cost projections. And if it's okay with you, Mr. Kerr, I would like to defer to them to let them explain how they got those costs, because that's not my cup of tea. I simply just took the numbers and pasted it. That's okay with you, sir?
Yes.
Elijah, can I defer to you and Tom now to give a brief overview and summary of the cost, make sure that I didn't misspeak, and then to address any questions the committee may have, sir?
Absolutely. Be happy to. Yeah, and Tom and Don, I went back real quick while we were talking there, and the schemes are for 3 classrooms, like you have shown, Don, and Tom, like you suggested, that was what we had kept that as 3 classrooms.
Yeah, don't tell Don that because he'll put people in it and get a label on it. We'll just keep those in our back pocket.
Gotcha.
I didn't hear that at all, so we're good.
So do you guys have printouts? I know that this is probably pretty hard to read on just the screen.
Elijah, they have printouts. Everything you see, they have hard copies.
Okay.
So if you want to just take it from here, the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. So thank you guys for pulling all this together. And we had based all of our estimate breakdown here on one-to-ones based on all of the areas that we were looking at
Elijah,
before.
wait for a moment.
Hey, Elijah, give us 1 minute. I'm sorry, sir. Go
Okay.
ahead, Mr. Harley.
Can you get this enlarged so that people watching it can see it?
Yeah, I could do that. Sure.
It's a little, they're never gonna see it. Cindy says they're never gonna see it anyway.
I printed from Cindy. I anticipated that, so you're welcome.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry
I
about the
was
11
rushing,
people
and I
online.
intended to bring my computer and I didn't get to, and I thought, oh, boy.
Oh, share.
There you go.
Share. Okay,
No,
go
I
ahead.
can't see that.
Go ahead, Elijah. I'm sorry.
No problem. So we tried to pick up everything that was mentioned by Mike and Jared's report before, especially at Ike. And then, so starting with the beginning of the meeting, East Pike, the old admin renovation. This number was done based on a couple of quick sketches that we had gotten for Eric and his team at CJL. But whenever we were looking at what was actually involved architecturally and for the estimation, we were able to look at takeoffs and actual fixture counts and individual square foot and linear foot basis, not just a bulk square foot per square foot cost for the classroom. We were actually looking at how much it costs to demo this wall, how much it costs to build this partition, that sort of thing. So, while obviously in today's market, and for a smaller project like this, the cost could go up or down. We don't think it's going to be significantly varying from this. And we did go back and confirm that number with our estimation department. So we feel fairly confident in the 135 for the East Pike. Moving into Eisenhower, we had done the previous study before. However, this looks at some more additions, some more classrooms and some more specialty classrooms, as well as parking. We looked at a couple of schemes and what we could realistically fit on the site based on some of the bottlenecks in some areas. We end up looking at a lot of off-street parking, but that does save us some of the pavement costs that you would typically see in parking lots where you have, in order to have a double loaded corridor, or the circulation ends up taking up space and therefore cost. So if we're parking right off of the road, you get some efficiency there. So we did include a number for 35 additional parking spaces. Separating the playgrounds, there would probably need to be some playground reconfiguration given everything that we would be putting onto that site, which includes one of the biggest ticket items here is the new multi-purpose space. This was sized to pick up a full high school basketball court with room for some seating on either side, and then the additional lobby for security if you want to use that as a community asset as well. You would want to be able to shut that off from the school at certain times of the day. And additionally, the restrooms that would be required for a higher occupancy area like the multi-purpose space. So that 10,000 square foot number approximately picks up everything that would be included in the gym, lobby, and restrooms. We put a small number in here for demolishing the stage in the existing multi-purpose space, as that would be needed to be entirely cafeteria as we increase the occupancy at the building. And we also, of course, have another of the big numbers is the admin entrance addition, which we've looked at previously and have a schematic for. And that's approximately the cost of some nice new construction out front there. Again, considering that this work is all probably being done by the same contractors at the same time. Now, if we have to break it out into separate projects and separate bids, at that point we would probably adjust these numbers and probably include some more escalation if we're considering the projects being stretched out. But this is assuming that it's 4 primes, but a project being done at one time. We've included 10% contingency, 10% soft costs to get you to that number for what is required, absolutely required of this scheme to work. we know well that there are a number of improvements that probably should be done at Ben Franklin, and so we wanted to show those as well while we are talking about them. We would stress that they're optional, but they're optional for the scheme to work. But these are the numbers that we would be looking at from a preliminary level before we get into too much more detail. And yes, we did include an elevator. Based on our previous schematic work, it was looking like a ramping scenario was not necessarily going to work for the split levels and the basement. But again, that's a conversation we could have, but we did want to include that as a budget number.
Elijah, this is Walter. Going back to your Ike work, I have a couple quick questions. The 6 to 7 new classrooms, are they stick built on site, or are they more of a pre-manufactured classroom?
These would be built on site.
Okay. And then the second thing is, I noticed that there's no line item in here for some of the upgrades to like the electrical system and so on. Some of which may be reimbursed as far as the fire insurance goes, but some of it may not, in order to bring the whole building sort of up to the same level. Is that a correct assumption, or is that just kind of hidden in your calculations here?
So that is something that needs to be discussed further. I know that we have some ongoing conversations with the insurance company and the lawyers to talk through how much of that needs to get included. But that's a correct assumption that we don't have that included here yet. I think we were waiting to see how that shook out, if you were able to get all of the costs for the renovation or only a portion of it.
So the total for Eisenhower, including the some of the repairs and or upgrades that we need to do in that building as a result of the fire, would need to be added to that figure of 6.7.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And if you'd like, we could add those numbers or add a guess at a balance or a couple different scenarios, if that would help.
Elijah, for me, it would help. That way I can give it to the board and let the board see that, because I want them to understand exactly what this is going to cost us. So if that's okay with you, Mr. Kerr?
Yeah, but I'm going to say that's going to be an estimate because of the ongoing negotiations with the insurance.
Well, they can do a cost estimate of the cost, and then we can, whenever we find out what the insurance, we can do a deduct, but then we would know the outside number.
Okay.
Sure. We'll do it that way.
Any other questions for Elijah before I move on? Okay. On the next couple slides, we talk about busing and the impact on busing. One challenge we find is getting everyone to start at the same time. This would give us an opportunity to start all schools on the same schedule. Drop off at 8:30, instruction at 9, end every day at 4. The other added benefit of this model is we would gain 5.5 days of instruction a year by having people work on a similar schedule between the buildings. Now, when you ask me if that matters in the middle of a pandemic when we're trying to recover learning loss, 5 extra days of instruction with no extra cost to the district is pretty pivotal and could be pretty powerful and impactful. But the board's going to have to weigh that out as well. We do lose a lot of instructional time in current dismissal process due to busing challenges we're faced with. Mike Travis does an amazing job getting all the buses running to 4 different buildings. Having one set schedule that everyone follows and trying to work within our system could be very beneficial, both financially, but more importantly to me, academically. Mike, anything you want to add about the buses when you did your work there?
I mean, as far as instructional time goes, it's hard to add to it under the model that we. Just briefly, just to let you know, as far as instructional time goes, adding instructional time based on adjusting bus routes is very difficult to do. You will see a little bit based on just the simple fact that you're transporting to one location rather than multiple locations. So you will see a little bit there, but it won't be a significant amount because of busing reasons. You're going to see more of an amount because of teachers not having to go from multiple locations, things like that. So you realize more instructional time that way. What you will find is under this model, we will be able to reduce the number of buses that we need to use because they'll be going to one location. Time-wise, they won't be they'll be using more. The transportation time will be more effective because they'll be going to one location rather than multiple locations.
How many buses, when you say, look, we'd use less buses, what number less would we use?
I projected I'll definitely be able to eliminate one bus, possibly more based on numbers and
Okay.
locations of students. So you realize you have about a $50,000 per bus per year savings.
Yeah, and to be pretty clear, Jared, help me here so I don't screw up. And Mike, it's $80,000 a year for a bus, but we get half of that reimbursed, so it's about a $40,000 cost locally to us. So, Ms. Barker?
Since Ike's gonna house mostly the borough children, would there be busing provided to them, or would there be busing starting at a certain distance?
Well, that would be up to you to decide that. I went with this model. I went with the model under the current guidelines, and that's busing everybody. If you want to revisit the eligibility lines for students that are within walking distance or that have safe walking ability to Eisenhower, which is the only building that would have. East Pike and Ben Franklin both located in hazardous walking roads areas, so they're to allow any students to walk to school from there. But that would be up to the board to decide.
What is that distance eligibility? Is it a half mile or 1.5 miles?
Under guidelines through the school code based on reimbursement costs or reimbursement levels, which is generally what schools do. It's 1.5 miles for elementary age schools, which would be K to 5, K to 6. And where Eisenhower is located is every point in the borough is less than 1.5 miles from the school. So it would be if you lived in the borough and you had a sidewalk in front of your house, you would be within that walking range.
But currently, you're planning on every kid that wants to ride a bus can ride a bus.
Yeah, because that's the
current
current board policy, board guidelines that you have now.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that we're not talking about changing that at this point. When you say, Mike, right now, the elementaries, you drop, the bus stops at Eisenhower, then stops at Horseman or vice versa,
Correct.
and you'll be able to eliminate one of those stops.
Yes.
Is
right
basically
now-
the savings that we're
Right
seeing.
now, under the model that we have, where we have students, different grade level students in different buildings, they're stopping at multiple buildings, whereas with the K to 5, they would stop at one building.
And this 15 minutes extra time of instruction means that we don't have the teachers out with the kids for 15 minutes while we get multiple buses in and out. And
Yeah, I'll defer to elementary principals, but the one thing we always hear is time.
Yeah.
There's never enough time. This adds some additional time to instruction per day, which equates to about 5.5 days of instruction a year. So it could add up because the one thing we always constantly face is time to get everything
We'll have
through.
less chaos when we pick kids up and drop them off because of the lack of a couple stops.
Right, like I said, it's basically you're having it's more effective travel time for the buses. They're effectively, picking students up on their way directly to the school, and rather than bypassing a school, going to another school, dropping off.
The next couple slides just talk about the pros and cons, and take time to digest these. And you can always add to them. These are some big takeaways we thought as far as the pros. It's going to have some consistency in programming, initiatives, and team-wide accountability in K to 5 regards to literacy. Right now, by having silos and having the split to 4 or 5, this would help in that area. You would have 5.5 days of additional instructional time. There's a slight savings in busing cost, as Mr. Travis alluded to. There'd be one less transition. It does build a community schools model for the borough residents. It allows us possibly, if the board chooses, to open up a third pre-K classroom or more, depending what happens at the federal level. It could be a more effective use of our special area teachers by cutting down on some of the traveling they're doing. and it could save some money due to one less building. Looking at the cons,
Mike, before you
Yep.
go on, I think the community school model statement would be for all three buildings, that each building would develop a community. One of the problems we have now is that community gets dispersed at every transition. So Ben Franklin would develop a PTA that's strong from pre-K to 5.
Yep. And honestly, Mr. Hart, you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if that's a pro or a con, because I think it's a pro long term. Short term, in my opinion, this will be the most disruptive move we make to families, because you'll take a kid who may be in Ben Franklin for 2 years and tell them, hey, you now have to go to Ike for 3 years. And I know what's going to happen. Can I stay in my school? I'll drive them. Can I stay in my school? And I can drive them. And that will have a negative, devastating impact on our class size guidelines. So the board has to be prepared for that. If we make these, and please, I don't want to be rude, but if we make these moves, then we have to kind of really stick to the catchment areas, and it will be long-term. If you want to do long-term, I think parents will love it. I think short-term, there'll be some real concerns about, why are you ripping my kid out of my school?
You moved 250 kids in 3 days. Okay, so I'm talking about trauma. So,
No.
And the kids are thriving. They're making it work.
Yeah, agree.
Okay,
I just want to put that on everyone's radar. Yep, that could be a so some of the cons, we got to do a lot more teaching, right? We're going to have to make sure the 4th and 5th grade teachers who now may be repurposed as, K through 3 teachers have the right tools to go in and help our kids. There could be additional staffing costs. This one's misleading. You're going to have renovating cost anyways. So I don't know if that's a con. If I'm going to put it there, I'm going to put it on another one, but that's just the reality of the matter. There's going to be a cost to this. Again, it could be disruptive to some families who would, we're going to have to lock in our class sizes, lock in our catchment areas. There'd be very little, if no, ability to move kids around, because it would it defeats the purpose of what we're doing transportation wise. It defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do with the community schools. And that would be something the board would have to be prepared to understand. We're tight, right? You're looking at 98% of your buildings being used, but I think that's why you want the buildings being occupied and being used. Parking and busing are a concern at Ike, but it's a concern now, right? We would have more kids in that building. But that's something that, Bucart Horn would have to help accomplish and address through their work. Students will not meet the rest of their class cohort to 6th grade. Again, that's something that the board would have to weigh in and see if they find value, but it's also one less transition. But they would be as a group, through the K through 5 level. I think the first year would be really tough, because you would have to redistrict. And that could be upsetting for a lot of families, good or bad, or some may get it or be fine with it. I don't know, but I do have a responsibility to tell you that. The last slide I have, I know we're running out of time, Mr. Kerr. I kind of, from my ignorance, I asked Bucart Horn, how does this work operationally? What is our timetable that we would have to work under? And they provided one for you to look at. So not to push you to make a decision, but every time we don't, there's a consequence. And I want you to feel comfortable when you make a decision. But here it would be a proposed critical path and next steps for you to consider. Again, not for tonight to debate. You can look over it. If there's any academic questions in business, email my team. If you want me to get anything else from Bucart Horn, I can do that. But we kind of did want to spell it out as far as next steps. What would that look like? So to help your committee, Mr. Kerr, make a decision.
And Mike, do you mind if I step in here and give a couple explanations on this?
Yeah, you could do a much better job than I did. So go ahead.
No problem. I like you said, Mike, this is one critical path, and obviously there's a lot of things that go into this. But I did want to point out a few things. This is not a generous critical path. There's a couple areas in here that I think are pretty tight. That if you'd like us to revise, we're more than happy to do. But we wanted to take a look at one way that could work for getting everyone into classrooms at Ike for fall of 2023. Again, this is pretty tight, and it requires a lot of stuff to fall in line. But some of those are simultaneous construction at the end of the project, having a contractor that's big enough, that's able to handle doing the multi-purpose edition, classroom editions, and the admin edition at the same time. That, as well as the site issues with the parking and the playgrounds, that would require him to pick up some laydown area and have a pretty big team in order to be pushing all these projects out within 8 months. So that's one area that I think is going to be pretty tight. Another is just the long leads issue. It's sort of tough to predict out a year and a half from now what's going to be happening, but we have anticipated 4 months may not be enough for some stuff like the big trusses that'll be needed in the multi-purpose area, big HVAC units, that sort of thing. We just don't know. We're trying to account for something in here, but that may not be enough. The other parts that are more controllable, we'll say, but on your end, on the district's end and the board's end, are moving ahead with a scheme. If this is the only option, right now we have it that this option is being approved at this meeting, and we're able to move ahead with the project right away. And then the other part in here I have is your review and approval throughout the process. And you can see we go pencils down throughout these steps in order to give you at least 2 weeks to review at each one of these steps. But if we could keep working on some areas while you review our progress, that's one way that we can save some time. Also, if you're comfortable going for code review before we're at 100% final documentation, that's another way that we can pick up some time. So again, this is one way. We wanted to show you one way to get to occupancy in fall of 2023. But I did want to explain those caveats while you're looking at it, that it is pretty tight, and we may need to look at ways to pick up some time or let the schedule out just based on reality. I would say put it that way.
All right, thank you, Elijah, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see your CPM attached to this presentation. So I think opened up probably a lot of people's eyes. And before I open,
Mike, can you hear me? This is Tom Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, I think the best argument everybody has for doing this is you have equal facilities for each child, K to 5, across the district, and that one building won't have a tremendous, a tremendous advantage in facilities because they'll all be approaching the same quality. And I think that's important for the parents to understand when they start complaining that they'd like to have their kid bus to here or not bus to there. I think the trick is to make the argument that we want to change this district to have equal facilities across the whole elementary program.
okay, thank you, Tom. And before I open up to the floor for questions and comments, thank Mr. Bukovic for your presentation and your team for putting this all together. But I want to throw this out before people are really leaving for our next meeting. You presented this K through 5 scenarios tonight, the 3 buildings. Next month, you will be prepared to present the other second option, which is the 2 buildings with pre-K to 3 and the 1, 4, 5 building.
Yes, sir.
And that'll be at my meeting, the building and grounds meeting next month,
We set up a special meeting, board committee.
December 13th.
Yes, sir. That's correct, sir.
And then the plan is discuss and compare the 2 options, the one being presented tonight and the one that'll be presented December 13th, then at the January academic committee meeting. Does Tom know that yet? He does now.
In January, yes, you're going to have some conversations. What we want to do, Mr. Kerr, thought was give you time to process tonight. You gives you a whole month. Then we hit next month and gives you the whole month. And then when we hopefully by January, you'll feel a little bit more equipped to make a decision that you feel comfortable with.
Right. And will we try and do that at the January academic meeting, or is that going to be a separate meeting after that?
If it's okay with you, I'd like to see how December 13th goes. And then I can give you that date maybe right after December 13th meeting. But we're looking for January.
Okay, that's right. Right. So I wanted Tom and Elijah to hear that because that needs added on to this CPM.
Yep.
So Tom and Elijah, we're not making a decision tonight on this because we have a whole nother option for the admin team to present in December. And then in January, we hope to make a decision on restrictions.
And the only thing I'll say is we work for the board. You tell us run faster, we run faster. This is one where I think we need to go slow to go fast. I know you say that and often don't do that. But this is one where I think we want to take our time, make sure you're comfortable because this is a decision you have to make. We want to make sure that you have all the time in the world to process this, critique it, analyze it. Because once we make a decision, we're going to move forward, you know?
And Tom's meeting in January, the academic meeting,
When did you say that would be there?
well, I don't think they're set yet.
Correct. We have to do it the reorg. Yep.
But that meeting will be a week before the board meeting then?
Yep.
Right.
Usually, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Well, it depends on when is January the 1st?
That's a Saturday.
is the day.
Okay, so Terry, to spin off on what you're suggesting, I think that the board, either at Tom's committee meeting or at your committee in January, depending on, again, the approval, that it would be the third Monday or the first Monday. And then I think we take it to the board for the final decision at a board meeting. But I think it needs to have some of the more freewheeling conversations that occur. And I know Julia's going to probably shoot me for this, but I think we do need to have some of that freewheeling discussion a little bit on these two items, maybe again with the help of SSI to help us through this in a logical manner, and then have the board actually make a decision in a formal board setting.
right, and I agree with that totally. So December 13th, we'll have a presentation on the 3 buildings, 2 pre-K to 3 and 1 4 to 5. Then the January meeting, we'll have a committee meeting to debate and discuss the 2 options. And then the next board meeting, we would then
If
have
we do
further-
January 3rd as the A&E meeting, that's the first Monday, and the second Monday we could do the board meeting.
Correct.
Correct, Tom. Assuming that the Mike is comfortable, SSI is comfortable, and the board in general is comfortable about doing it that way.
Yeah, and that's true, okay, except I'm looking at this thing and we got some work to do. Or this turns into
The
2024
the
without
date-
us thinking about it.
Absolutely, Tom. And I neglected to state that the sooner we come to this conclusion, the better we are of meeting that critical path that they've laid out for us, regardless of which option. Even a 2-week delay could push the thing back a month or 6 weeks or whatever from completion. I get that. Because there could be an amplifying effect there.
Yeah, well, yeah, on this critical path, he's starting design on December 10th. And we're pushing it back a full month just on this current schedule. And I'm okay with that. But I don't want it to turn into February.
Understood.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Well, once you vote then in January, wouldn't you have to schedule an Act 34 and a cooling off period? So that would delay even more so.
I think we need to refer to our solicitor on that. We're not voting to close the school. We're voting to improve 3 buildings.
Yeah, there's that legal process we have to go through, and it would, take some additional time. I think what I would say is work with our attorney, and if you know you're keeping Ike, then you could start to work at Ike. Closing a building is a separate issue, but you're right. We have to go through that hearing. It has to be public, and there has to be a cooling off period. You're absolutely right, Ms. Barker. And we can work on those details when we get to it. Right now, we were just charged with this one item, and I hope it helped. Provide you with the clarity you needed, and then we'll do the next one next month. Actually, we meet on Thursday, I want to say this week, to start the next process, and then I'll compile it and do another presentation for everyone.
Yeah, sorry for throwing that in, but I thought it was an opportune time since Elijah had just gone through the CPM. And, I'm on record saying there's no doubt that the CPM is going to change many times because we don't know what the supply chain is going to do and all that. So it pretty much all we can do is commit to going as fast as we can, and I'm sure the architect will also. So
Terry, one more time, I'd like to invite either Sue or Jim if you have any questions or comments on this, because this is something that, after you're sworn in, that this will be a decision that the board at that time will have to make.
At this point, I don't have any questions right now. I'd like to wait to hear the second proposal and then kind of weigh the pros and cons.
Jim?
The same mindset, I think the same thing, get all the options on the table and then have an intelligent conversation.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything, comments or questions at this point for what was presented tonight? Or what the plan is going forward? Hearing nothing, they would close the meeting, and I think it's very productive, very good. So
Thank you,
we're
Mr.
gonna
Kerr.
go into executive session.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're running a little behind. Yes, sir.
And